There's some research coming out that suggests that standing is a good thing, but also the one client group in particular that's coming out is the muscular dystrophy boys, that with advances in medical treatment they're going off their feet later, in which case you're looking at standing frames and power wheelchairs together. So the logical thing is, why don't we get something that does both? Both Enable and Accessible are looking into what this might look like in terms of provision of chairs, but the other group we are seeing requests for is the cerebral palsy teenagers who, in standing, some of them can do more, or it extends their functional abilities if they can come into a standing position independently. In due course there will be guidelines around this, but it's something that we're hearing more of now. So taken from the reason statement, the benefits of power standing. So functional reach, obviously improved mobility and lower limb function. For some of our people with MS, that actually using a standing frame helps manage their tone, whether it's helping maintain some of their lower limb strength, in which case if using the standing frame either is not viable for space constrictions within the home or the assistance they need to get in and out, and saying that they are still stand transferring, that power standing might be an option. Sal's had an interesting one lately with a Guillain-Barré person who's regaining function, and it was a real interesting exercise in looking at why we would provide that. But it is around maintaining range of motion and helping to, when he does get some strength back, is helping preserve that in terms of he's expected to regain function. Like I've mentioned about abnormal tone and spasticity, reducing the occurrence of skeletal deformities and maintaining range of motion, which is typically what we provide standing frames for. So, but like I said, for some cases you do think about combining this.
Can also be accommodating. I work with a young lady who has 20 degrees hip flexion on one side and 35 on the other. So the only way we could seat her was semi-standing, and she drives semi-standing.
There's some nice literature coming out around bone health and maintaining bone density, and promote vital organ capacity, and one biggie for this is actually bladder and bowel health in terms of effectively draining a bladder. Things to consider. Requires physiotherapist input. This is something that actually with Accessible and us have discussed, in that standing frames are typically provided by physiotherapists, and that we're not sure it's good practice for, not to bag the occupational therapists, but whether or not they're providing them on their own, and that I think that the physio input should be in as well. And it may be that in future applications we actually want to see both assessor names, so it'll go through as one will be the primary, but we do want to know that a physio has been consulted, and that they do have the standing credential in terms of criteria. You require reasonable range of motion in your lower limbs, particularly if you're going from that sitting to standing position, that you actually need to have the range to do that. And so for some of our people who've been in a chair for a long time, that may not be viable. If you've got someone who's got reduced sensation and reduced range of motion, it's whether they know that they're at the limits of their range. And in case you're looking at power actuators and the ability to potentially do harm if the person's reaching their outer range and they're not aware of it. So it's just keeping people safe. Bone density has been touched on before, and these are complex chairs, and it's watching those who are particularly heavy users and looking at standing. You just have to question whether that's a good idea. So they're starting at about $30,000, and you've got your repair and maintenance bills on top of that. So in some respects, providing a power chair, particularly if it's just you're looking at a mid-wheel drive with tilt plus a standing frame, from a funding point of view is the more cost-effective option, in that we can easily reissue both. Both of them are easy to service and maintain. The benefit of the power standing can be the functional gains you get from it. So, and we've had some brilliant stories about what people have been able to do when they're put in power. These are the three ones that mainly get used. So the Levo C3, which has just got a single actuator for standing, so you're sitting and then you move into standing and then you've got tilt. Your Combi and your F5 are probably a similar type of chair. So Combi being mid-wheel drive, your Permobil being front-wheel drive. Both of them have got multiple actuators in terms of you can go to supine and then come up into standing, which might be needed for some, but also your chair can do a whole assortment of other things. The price difference, your Levo C3 being around $30,000, no seating. Your Combi and your F5, you're 40 plus. Yeah, so, and for some people that's money well spent. For some, you do just have to just question that you've got reasonable justification for why you're going for that. And for some there is. The Pert and Bull is one we've seen a lot of lately, although I believe the Combi can do the same thing with your memory programming for functions and things like that, so you can get it to do all sorts of things. So for some of our high functioning users, the F5 in terms of motors and performance is a very high functioning chair. Our thoughts around funding. For some it's determining that the improved functional reach is essential, so this is needed and I think Rachel's had one where this let the mother cook dinner before her husband came home from school, in which case they had a young child and the husband used to get home late, so it actually wasn't completely feasible, but also toileting was tied in with that as well. It might be for work that if they can come into a standing position, it lets them complete their duties to a higher level, or lets them reach their potential in terms of, and I think Wellington's one area we've got a lot of high performing people in very high performing jobs. So yeah, and the chairs meets that. Again, maintaining strength and range of motion for standing transfers, which does tie in with the standing frame criteria. Again, so for some of our people who've got some very challenging physical needs, standing can be a way of managing this. But to remember that all other options have been explored and that they're excluded for whatever reason. Yeah. And joint funding with Ministry of Ed is an option if it improves the access to the curriculum. So instead of Ministry of Ed funding elevating seat on a power chair, or it might be that they're funding building mods, we're doing the contribution for what would be the mid-wheel drive power chair, typically, and the standing frame, and then Ministry of Ed are paying the rest, so because that's standing in the school environment, so typically intermediate or early high school, lets them access technology, lets them access science, it lets them do all of this. So, yeah, and again we'll be looking for some national consistency about how this is funded. With the different technology coordinators for Ministry of Ed, this is being processed slightly differently across the country. So, cool. Very brief overview, but like I said, we're hopeful that some guidelines will come out so that it's for you as assessors, you know what us as funders are thinking.